Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Shaheed, that you give us the possibility to speak with you now in this sphere. And you had yesterday as a keynote speech with the title was Islam and the State. Is there a way back to the future? I would like to ask you just to conclude your presentation in a few sentences, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. My paper was focused on understanding how we have come to a situation where we are now, where there's a rise in political Islam, and how do we get back to a situation where we deal with them. And my main conclusions were that we need to respect the rule of law, we need to have more respect for human rights, because this addresses issues of majoritarian democracy and liberal democracy, and also invest in education, because we also have to win the discourse, because for now the discourse has been very much left to the Islamists to fashion in any way they want to do so.
We have a project in Vienna called Citizenship, Education and Islam. When you speak about education, what needs to be done in the field of education to avoid radicalism or social cohesion, for example?
Well, many things. First of all, the quality of the education is important. By education, I mean having access to quality education for everybody, so that it will lead to a career path that is also sustainable. But the other point of education is also to really be more informed about what Islam is, be more informed about how the radical discourse is fashioned, and therefore to have the answers to that. Very few people know actually that the idea of an Islamic state is a myth. That's not very widely known. So we have to have that discourse more widely discussed amongst people.
Islamic State as a myth. A lot of Muslims would say it's not a myth. It's this is what God wants to have us. So this form of political Islam should be somehow rejected when we speak about separation of religion and governance. Do you see that Muslims are in a way to recognize this, let's call it fact, that it needs to be separated?
Well, the idea of a Muslim state is not the same thing as an Islamic state. There are many Muslims living in the world where they're a majority and they fashion in some way, privileges to the faith, but that doesn't necessarily mean they should create discrimination for others. In terms of having a Muslim state or Islamic state, the truth is there's so much diversity in the world that you cannot say this or that is the Muslim state. And one basic criterion is that we all agree there should be equality of citizenship. So there are certain basic modern conditions that require for everybody's survival that have to be rooted in a modern context. And the start off is the idea of equal citizenship. So yes, you mentioned about education on citizenship. These include things like everybody's equality, the idea that you can have your space for your faith, but so long as you don't intrude on the rights of others as well. So there is the scope for, have any faith thrive, but in harmony with everybody else as well.
Because with the idea that what I wanted to say is lost the point now. Political Islam. How would you define? How would you define political Islam when somebody says no, Islam is something covers everything? What would you say? How would you define political Islam?
Well, political Islam is the idea that modern state structures should fit certain Islamic principles. These principles essentially saying that there should be hierarchy of citizenship, that Muslims should be privileged and others should not. So it is the idea of recreating what may have been an Abbasid state or an Umayyad state or some other Muslim state of the past as a modern state. That trend, the idea of having Muslim dominance over a polity, is what makes an Islamic state.
Now I got the point again. I wanted to ask you about when we speak about political Islam, it's easy to divide the world into Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. And I say just because we don't have an Islamic ruler or a Muslim as a ruler, as a governor, we still live somehow in Dar al-Islam. because Muslims are protected by law. They can live their religion within freedom of religion. We have social care, health care, whatever. Would you agree with that? That you don't you do not need a Muslim leader to have a Muslim state?
Well, the idea of the Darul, Islam, Darul, Harb, that is coming from much later stage of the Islamic, scholarship. Islamic scholars developed ideas to describe what they actually found. And yes, if you look at the very first Muslim state was established, there's the state of Medina. It put everybody together, and more than what actually was in it, the process was there was a consultation amongst everybody. And they all agreed on a common state for everybody. So to divide a binary of Islamic and non-Islamic doesn't make sense in the 21st century. This wasn't the practice of the earliest Muslims, and this isn't even the Muslim ideology. Muslim ideology is about embracing everybody. God says in the Quran that God made male and female and made them into tribes and nations so that everybody may know each other. So that diversity is something that is blessed in Islam.
Last question, Professor Shaheed, was about Islam and Europe. Is it a contradiction?
Well, why don't you say Islam in Asia,
Yes.
Islam in Africa, Islam, these are geographic regions, and we talk about faith, right? Well, Islam has been in Europe and known to Europe for centuries. There has been ebb and flow in terms of the numbers of people here, but in the present time, there are so many Muslims living in Europe, as with other faiths, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and all the faiths in the world are in Europe, and therefore you could not say that Islam is not part of Europe. It is part of the present European order. It is also part of the heritage in the sense there was so much cultural and historical exchange between Muslims and those who were in all parts of the world.